Hello, my dear students. Welcome to the English YouTuber. And today we are going to discuss the poem Why I Like the Hospital, written by Tony Hoagland. So, before we go into the poem, first let's look at the title of this poem. So, here the poet has actually used a paradoxical title because nobody likes the hospital. And actually, it arouses a curiosity among the readers as to why he has chosen such a title. Let me give you a gist of what this poem is about. It is actually a very touching analysis of the various experiences one can have in the hospital premises. And hospital is a place with emotional honesty. So, unlike the superficial modern society where everyone is asked to numb their emotions, the hospital is a place which strips away pretense and allows people to be vulnerable, their authentic self, where they can portray their grief and self reflection. Now, this is why the poet has actually used this title. We'll come across this as we go in depth. So, let's begin. And the poet has used free verse. So there is no kind of meter or any kind of rhyming scheme throughout the poem. So the poet has used simple language which is straightforward, and maybe the poet wants simplicity and emotional transparency, and that is why it is written in such simple form. So first let's go through the first stanza. Because it is all right to be in a bad mood there, slouching along through the underground garage, riding wordlessly on the elevator with the other customers, staring at the closed beige doors like a prison wall. Okay, so the first line says, because it is all right to be in a bad mood there. So he is now justifying why he likes the hospital, because he's saying that one can be in a foul mood without being judged. So there is no pretense in a hospital. It is all right to not be cheerful, and one needn't pretend that they are all right. Why is he saying that? Because society often asks us to mask our emotions. But here one can be vulnerable. Slouching along through the underground garage. So here, why has the poet used slouching? The poet wants to show that the people who come to the hospital, they are physically and emotionally tired. They are facing heaviness, and maybe they kind of have a fatigue, that is, they might be weighed down by illness, or they are sad because of the anticipation of a bad news. So here they have physically surrendered themselves to the emotional burden that they are carrying. And here the underground garage is used. Usually the entry to a hospital is very dark. It is a stark contrast to the bright outside world where people are expected to look cheerful. So in order to bring the stark contrast, the poet has used an underground garage or the underground parking space where people are slouching and silently moving along. So let's go through that sentence again. People are slouching, that is because they are weighed down by either fatigue, some kind of illness, or the anticipation of bad news. And they're moving along through the underground parking lot, and it is described as a place that is dark and grim, which is in stark contrast to the bright outside world. Okay, I hope that sentence is clear. Let's move to the next line. Riding wordlessly on the elevator with the other customers. So, here the poet has used great imagery where we can imagine people moving silently through the elevator with other people. These could be patients or visitors. And here the poet has used the word customers. So this could mean that now the hospitals have a very business mindset where each patient is like a customer to them where they can take money. Staring at the closed beige doors like a prison wall. So beige is a light brown color. So here people are gazing at the closed doors of the hospital, and it is symbolic, or it seems like it is a prison wall. Here the poet is symbolizing the closed doors of the hospital to be of confinement and restriction in there, and how people feel trapped inside a hospital. It could be because of someone they love or themselves who are ill. And hospital is a place of solitude and sadness. So the people who visit the hospital also feel the same. So here simile is used because the closed doors are compared to prison walls. So I hope the first stanza is clear. Shall we move to the next one? The next stanza he says, I like the hospital for the way it grants permission for pathos. So what is the meaning of the word pathos? Pathos means evoking intense emotions. So here it grants permission to express your intense emotions freely. So here he's saying that the status of a person, everything is removed and one can truly show their genuine emotions and moments of humanity. So he likes the hospital because it provides space for deep and sorrowful emotions. In the next few lines, the different scenarios in a hospital are explained where people are grappling with life altering scenarios. A mother with cancer deciding how to tell her kids. So, here there are some life altering scenarios where a mother who has a terminal disease like cancer is figuring out how to tell this information to her kids. The bald girl gazing downward at the shunt. So, a bald girl, she has lost all her hair and she's gazing down at the shunt. Shunt is a small pipe which is meant for flowing blood. So, maybe she has gone through chemotherapy, and because of that, she has lost her hair, and there is a shunt also placed, installed above her missing breast. So maybe she had breast cancer and she's gazing down at the shunt which is placed above her missing breast. So these lines create emotions of empathy, and it also reminds us about how one has to be strong when faced with hardships. So these are the various scenes of melancholy shown. The crone in her pajamas walking with an ivy pole. So one more person is added. That is, crone means an old woman who is in her pajamas and she's walking around with an intravenous pole attached to her. That is, the intravenous is attached to her vein. I don't like the smell of antiseptic or the air conditioning set on high all night, or the fresh flowers tossed into the wastebasket. So here he is saying that he finds certain things unpleasant, like the smell of strong cleaning products like the antiseptic that is used in the hospital, or the uncomfortably cold temperature of the AC that is set at low temperature throughout the night. So here he is portraying how clinical environments sometimes lack empathy for patients, or the fresh flowers tossed into the wastebasket. So here it represents apathy or the crushed hope, or it symbolizes unfulfilled expectations or the sudden impermanence of life. So it also shows that hospital shows the harsh reality where pretty appearing flower bouquets are quickly abandoned, and where we have to face the brutal truth of suffering. So these lines symbolize coldness, apathy, and the neglect that the patients feel in a hospital. But I like the way some people on their plastic chairs break out a notebook and invent a complex scoring system to tally up their days on earth. The column on the left says, times I acted like a fool, facing the column on the right that says, times I acted like a saint. So when people come to the hospital, some people, they reflect back on their lives, making a tally of their days on earth, measuring if their actions were good or bad. And here they have finally found time to reevaluate their life choices. So it is a time of self reflection, and they have found time to understand about the transient nature of life, that life is not permanent. So when people are in the outside world, there is so much chaos, noise that they never find time to introspect about their lives or spend time with themselves. But here in the quiet space of the hospital, they finally get time in the midst of their illness for self awareness and self improvement, where they get to evaluate their deeds and actions of how they were virtuous or how they were a fool in certain aspects of their life. I like the long prairie of the waiting. So, what is prairie? Prairie is a large, vast open space. The forced intimacy of the self with the self. Each sick person standing in the middle of a field, like a tree, wondering what happened to the forest. So here the poet has used metaphor of comparing the waiting period to a long prairie. So here the poet captures the forced isolation of a person in the waiting room, which is a very long forced isolation, where the person is separated from the outside world, separated from all the chaos and noise, and is left completely alone with their own thoughts to introspect about their lives. So it is a kind of a forced intimacy where in the outside world they might not get the opportunity, but here they are forced to think within. So during the long periods of waiting, one is forced to spend time with themselves for self reflection and introspection, where they are without any kind of distraction. Each sick person standing in the middle of the field like a tree. So, here again, simile is used where a person is compared to a single tree that is isolated in a wide open field and which once used to be part of a forest. So, here, forest is a part of the large group, that is in the crowd. But now the person is alone in the middle of the field like a lone tree. That means here he's showing that the person is isolated and away from the crowd. So these lines are a metaphor for the profound isolation, loneliness, and vulnerability that a person who is sick faces and feels disconnected from the wider world. And once I saw a man in a lime green dressing gown. So again, imagery is used here for you to imagine the person hunched over in a chair, a man who was not yelling at the doctors or pretending to be strong or making a murmured phone call to his wife. So here the poet is talking about a man in a hospital gown who is openly crying and showing his emotions instead of suppressing his emotions and venting it out in other ways, such as screaming at the doctors or pretending to be strong and unaffected. He isn't calling his wife and lying, consoling her that he was okay, but rather he is processing and confronting his raw emotions. So here the man has definitely found sanctuary in a hospital where he does not have to act strong or hide the pain, but he is finding solace in a place where he is allowed to feel genuine emotions and confront his mortality and sickness. So this man was sobbing without shame, pumping it all out from the bottom of the self. So here the figure of speech used is hyperbole, where pumping it all out from the bottom of the self means to say that the depth of emotions that were suppressed inside are all released. So what is bilge? Bilge is a part of a ship's hull where waste water collects. So it is actually the dirtiest part of a ship. So here the poet is using a very powerful metaphor that the dark emotions that were buried inside are all flowing out. The emotions of helplessness, the emotions of rage, everything is being expelled by sobbing without any kind of shame. A man no longer expecting to be saved. That means the man is now feeling liberated. He has accepted that he has a terminal disease and he is going to die. But if you looked, you could see. So he's saying if you examine closely, you could see that he was holding his own hands in sympathy. So if you would see closely, you would notice that he was holding his own hands in sympathy. So he's showing self-compassion. He was pacifying or comforting or consoling himself by holding his own hands, listening to every single word, and he was telling himself everything. So he was listening to his own words of acknowledgement and he was validating his own feelings. So here he is being kind to himself even when there is no ray of hope. So it's showing that we can be strong and accept situations, and during such times we have to be strong by showing self compassion and love to oneself. So here the poet also wants to show the human ability to comfort oneself when we need it the most. We've seen that the man might have been running away from the thoughts and might have been years avoiding the thoughts in his mind, but finally now he was listening. He did not try to minimize his pain, he simply allowed the grief to speak. So, this is the poem which explains about a place where we are made to confront the reality, a place where we are the most vulnerable, a place that shows us the harsh reality. It's a place of pain, but however, it also shows us the mirror to our life. And maybe that is why the poet says that he likes the hospital. Now we are done with the poem. Let's go through the various themes in this poem. The first is emotional vulnerability. The poet mentions that we live in a society where we are often asked to mask our true emotions and repress it. We are constantly pressurized to always appear happy. However, in a hospital, a person can freely and without any pretense be in a foul mood without being judged. It is a space that legitimizes emotional vulnerability. The next is human suffering. The common experiences in the hospital highlight the universal nature of pain and suffering among people. It reminds us that suffering is also an integral part of living, and through the description of the various patients, it shows the raw reality of human pain and endurance. The next is isolation and loneliness. The hospital is also a place for long waiting, which is shown through the metaphor long prairie of the waiting, emphasizing long periods of isolation, waiting, and forced intimacy with the self. Thus, a patient experiences a lonely, uncertain journey of life with alienation even from loved ones. The hospital door is also compared to a prison wall, which symbolizes confinement, restriction, and how trapped we feel when we are separated from normal life. The next is finding solace in themselves. In the poem, a man is made to confront his situation that his days are numbered. Instead of suppressing his emotions, he sobs without shame and releases all his pent up emotions. The man was not only honest with his feelings, but he was showing self compassion and holding his own hands in sympathy, showcasing that showing kindness to oneself can be an important coping mechanism. The next is self introspection and evaluation. In the outside world, we are never alone or surrounded with so much noise that people never find the time to reflect back upon their lives. However, the isolation in the hospital provides time for introspection, measuring their actions if they were virtuous or bad. Thus, in the midst of illness, there is a mirror shown to ourselves for self awareness and self improvement. The next is impermanence of life. The hospital setting, the various patients, and isolation makes us realize the transient nature of life and that one mustn't wait until it is too late to measure their actions, but reflect upon their actions from time to time. At the end, we all feel lonely like a lone tree isolated in a field away from the forest. Thus, it is important to be kind to ourselves and seek self empathy. And those were the themes in this poem. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please share it among your friends and people among your batch whom you think this is definitely going to help them. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. I'm praying for each one of you. God bless.